Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for January 12th through the 18th, 2025. I thought that today we would forego the camera work and stick with just the slides, as I'm going to be jumping around on the map quite a bit, and I thought that might be a little bit easier for everyone to follow along with. So let's get right to it. Starting off in the southeast region, let's go ahead and start with Georgia, in which an incident occurred in the Georgia Capitol building a couple of days ago involving Senator Colton Moore. Just as a brief backstory, Senator Moore has been a very vocal participant in the exposure/criticism of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and in her prosecution of Donald Trump. So much so that he was one of the stronger voices for exposing some of her local corruption and things like that at the local state level. As one might expect, in Georgia, Donald Trump himself is not a particularly popular face in some political circles down there, especially within the GOP. So a voice like Senator Moore being rather active in Trump's defense was not taken very well. As such, Senator Moore has been really kind of raked over the coals throughout some of the more administrative things that have gone on in Congress. And one of the things that sort of sparked kind of a larger argument is his remarks on a former speaker of the House, who a lot of big GOP names and power players in Georgia politics were trying to name a building after. So the short version of the story is Senator Moore had previously gone after Fani Willis and kind of upset a lot of the never Trump kind of Republicans in Georgia sort of thing. Then Senator Moore decides to not want to support the naming of a building after a former Speaker of the House, simply because that Speaker was embroiled in a lot of controversy and a lot of unsavory things. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And this was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back and allowed the Speaker of the House to ban Senator Moore from the House floor. Of course, Senator Moore being a senator and the House Speaker being in charge of the House, this is one of those kind of political rule things that actually can happen. The problem arose yesterday when Senator Moore was trying to enter the House floor after being banned for a joint session. So this is one of those things where it sounds like it's just some, internal political problem, but really it's a much larger issue because to the best of my knowledge, and I'm certainly no expert on the, geopolitics of Georgia, but to the best of my knowledge, if you're holding a joint session and you're allowing senators to come from the Senate over to the House floor, to do their job, right, you can't exactly ban them from the House floor. So that's exactly the position that Colton Moore took, thus him trying to gain entry to the House floor, and of course being arrested in the process. Of course, the Georgia State Police that were involved in the arrest and all of the Capitol Police that were involved in this were all too happy to arrest him, so there was absolutely no resistance there. They followed their orders to a T. So, of course, this kind of brings into question who really controls, Congress down in Georgia, and it's kind of been a political thing since then. So I did want to highlight it because it's kind of a very interesting thing that I think we'll start seeing more of politically throughout a lot of the other state houses and state senates around the country, over the next 4 years. So again, canary in the coal mine kind of thing. Moving up to Washington, D.C., as one might expect, the Inauguration Day preparedness continues throughout the city, even though it looks like most of the ceremonies are going to be moved indoors. Like I mentioned in The Wire yesterday, initial indications and warnings emerged that Trump and the Trump team and really a lot of people kind of involved in this whole process decided to move the event indoors. Now, they're claiming that it's due to weather. It's going to be due to cold weather. I think that's a fairly flimsy excuse. It's very obviously, in my mind, due to security concerns, which, like I mentioned, is not entirely a bad idea. I think probably the bigger point of consternation amongst, event goers is that a lot of people paid. A lot of people paid for tickets and paid for, attending various events that are now going to be behind very secure fences and things like that. So for those of you who are planning to go to DC for the event, I'll talk more about this on the map in a second, but one thing that I did want to mention that may be a factor for this last minute change is the company DJI, which a few days ago, earlier in the week, decided to push out a software update to allow, or actually rather remove, a lot of geofencing requirements for consumer-grade drones. This is a much larger story, and I should probably delve more into it, but the short version of this is that previously, a lot of consumer-grade drones in the United States were actually geofenced. So if you wanted to take a drone and take it to the National Mall right at the base of the Washington Monument, for instance, and take it off, and fly around, the software itself wouldn't do it. It wouldn't be an external jamming thing going on. It would be actually DJI's software for these consumer grade, buy it straight off of Amazon kind of drones. The software itself wouldn't allow you to take off. So it's not something that's external that would prevent the drone from flying. Well, now DJI has changed their software to allow for these consumer grade drones the ability for those drones to actually fly, even if they're technically not allowed to. Now, I should mention that for a lot of the larger drones, which include things like remote ID and broadcasting their kind of position and things like that, this is not a change on that front. Really, this is probably going to be mostly felt in terms of smaller quadcopter drones that don't have remote ID capabilities or requirements. So what does this mean? Well, it means that it could be, and this is just a theory of mine, that it could be the reason for bringing Trump inside for the swearing in inside the Capitol building could be related to this. It could be a drone threat. This has been kind of a concern for people for a very, very long period of time. I personally have varying thoughts on the actual risk of this. I think that really a malign actor who's dedicated is not going to be using a commercial off-the-shelf drone. They're going to be using a handmade drone that has none of these remote ID or geofencing requirements anyway. So a dedicated terrorist who wants to use a drone to attack something such as in like Ukraine, maybe, a Ukrainian style kind of attack. They're not going to be using these commercial off-the-shelf drones. So I think that a lot of the panic with regards to this DJI decision is a little bit overstated. However, this decision does drastically increase the number of goobers out there that can fly into stuff they're not supposed to. So, for that reason alone, it's probably going to shift our risk assessment slightly, but I can't say definitively that DJI making this decision to unlock all the geofencing on their drones is why they move the event inside. It's probably a combination of factors. The fact that there's still a lot of concerns as to whether the U.S. Secret Service can actually do their job. It's probably just a culmination of risk assessments that realized that it would probably be a little bit better just to have the event inside. So with that in mind, let's jump over to the map. Alright, so here on the SIPCOP map, let's go ahead and go to Washington, D.C. Again, for those of you who maybe not have heard about this kind of project I'm working on, this is an incident tracking map that I'm working on and trying to improve as time goes on, but it makes it a little bit easier to share information that has a geospatial component to it. So this is just one kind of tool that I'm working on. But as we can see here, let me pull up my layers, go to incident tracking, inauguration day. Now, obviously, for those of you who may be a little bit concerned, I'm obviously not going to be doing any sort of public, intelligence preparation of the battle space or IPB for the Washington, D.C. area for very obvious reasons. Not only is it not a good idea to talk about some of this stuff in kind of the open world, but it's also very dangerous to one's safety, if you know what I mean, to be kind of pointing out some of the vulnerabilities in this region. So not a super great idea anyway, but I did want to highlight the products that have been published from Washington, D.C. themselves for those of you who may be going to the event. So let's just go ahead and turn on, this is a georeferenced map overlay that was provided by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Secret Service that highlight the zones. They're going to be closed off, so it's going to be basically the entire National Capital Region, as you might expect. However, there was a minor discrepancy I noticed when I turned on the layers that were created by the basically the Washington, D.C. GIS manager. So let me turn off, let's see, the road closures, and let's just look. Say, for instance, down here by L'Enfant Station, we can see that there is a little bit of a discrepancy there. If I turn off and on the image, it looks like there's a lot of area that DC is saying is closed, but Homeland is saying is open. So just something to keep in mind. Shocker, I know, government agencies not talking to one another is kind of a thing that's happened since the dawn of time. So yeah, that's just a reminder to be flexible. Remember that there's not a whole lot you can do about this sort of thing. It's just the way that it is. Our capital being fenced off for any kind of major event to restrict citizens' access is just a thing that kind of has been normalized now. So anytime the National Capital Region has some sort of event, this is kind of what you can expect. But anyway, just in case something happens or some kind of malign actor wants to make a fuss or something like that, I'll leave these layers on just for you guys who may be wanting to be aware of what's going on in the area. So jumping back to the slides here, let's go out west and talk about the Los Angeles wildfires. As one might expect, the firefighting efforts continue and have made good progress with regards to the Pacific Palisades and the Eaton fires. In addition to the Los Angeles wildfires, I did want to briefly mention the Vistra power plant fire up in Northern California, which is a fire that it didn't really affect locals that much. There were localized evacuations, but it's largely a fire that is contained to one of the battery storage facilities at this installation. The reason that I did want to mention it, however, is because this is allegedly, or at least they claim, this is the largest battery storage facility in the world. So, like I mentioned in the wire, this is not just a standard natural gas power plant. They do a lot of energy storage there. So they generate the power, and then they store it in batteries, very, very, very large batteries at this plant. So having unknown damage done to one of the battery storage facilities at this plant is probably going to cause some problems for the electrical infrastructure of Northern California for some time. It's hard to say, though. Officially, there hasn't really been much information come out about this, but I guess we'll have to see over the next few days. Moving back down to Los Angeles, like I mentioned, the fires continue. However, Los Angeles at large is kind of shifting into recovery mode. And before we jump back to the map and discuss that, I wanted to briefly mention one of the problems that has kind of come up with regards to the Los Angeles fires recovery, which is, again, politics getting into play, which is unfortunate, but it does happen. And this is a county order that was issued a few days ago that states, or is preventing, rather, it's preventing the cleanup, any kind of cleanup operations. So people are trying to go back to their homes. Evacuation orders are lifted. They can go back to their homes, but the county will not let anyone, or looks like it won't let most people clean up or remove the fire debris until a county inspector comes out and approves of their trash, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it's one of those things that's just kind of complicating things, because cleanup is one of those things that just kind of needs to happen, right? And waiting on a government inspector to show up takes time. So let's jump back to the map and we'll briefly cover some of the events in Los Angeles. Alright, so here in Los Angeles, I have not, unfortunately, been able to make too many updates with regards to some of the rioting and the looting that's going on or went on following these fires. However, the CAL FIRE and Los Angeles County officials have been hard at work updating the fire maps. So this is obviously not my work. It's something that I'm just pulling in as a data layer from my end. But you can see here in, say, for instance, Santa Monica here, Santa Monica North in the Palisades area as well, you can see all the fire damage. So black houses are ones that are still standing and still good to go. Red houses are ones that have over 50% damage. In most cases, most of these houses are destroyed. So just wanted to briefly mention this map. You can see that a lot of areas have not been covered yet. You can see this one's actually in progress. You can see someone's going down the street. So this takes a physical person walking by and photographing each one of these houses, conducting a survey, right? From the ground, and it takes time. So it does not mean that, say, for instance, that there's no damage in this area just outright. It just means that the inspector or the volunteer has not gotten there yet. So that's just something to keep in mind with regards to how this map kind of operates and works. You can see over here in Palisades proper, it's really hit or miss. Again, traditional wildfire behavior is hard to predict sometimes, but we can see that a lot of this area has been totally and completely devastated. Let's head over to Altadena for a second. Same thing, same story. You can see in Altadena North here a lot of houses that are just completely gone, entire blocks gone in some cases. So this is very serious wildfire. Again, like I mentioned, just because there's no one who has marked out this particular area yet, it's just the inspector hasn't gotten there. So just something to keep in mind moving forward. But yeah, Altadena hit pretty hard. We can see that there are a lot of mandatory evacuation zones in place. I don't know if the fire evacuation zones are still in place at this moment to really do anything more than to prevent people from moving back in and then having to move right back out. Again, when it comes to evacuation zones, you really do have to think sometimes about, the behavior of people and, kind of social sciences kind of thing. And one of the things that a lot of city planners have to think about and emergency officials have to think about is, well, the risk isn't over yet, and it looks like it may be safe for now, but the problem is that if we let people move back in, they're going to be even less inclined to move back out again. Just telling a citizen, hey, look, you can move back in because it seems safe for now, but in a couple of days it may not be safe anymore. That's one of those things where people are just not going to move out if they're allowed back in a lot of cases. A lot of people feel a lot of strong ways about it, but look at the devastation here. It's kind of we're dealing with a lot of people, or at least the local authorities are dealing with a lot of people. So this is probably why, my personal theory, this is probably why a lot of these evacuation zones remain in place. Not necessarily that the fire risk is the same as before, but that they want to make sure that it's actually totally and completely safe before people are allowed to return, rather than just waiting for the risk to be slightly reduced, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So let's talk aid for a moment. Of course, Los Angeles is well known for being a very, very big epicenter for local aid and kind of humanitarian causes, I suppose. Everyone in the city is kind of involved in something like that, so to speak, generally. So let's go ahead and go to the layers here. Let me see if I have it turned on. Yeah, I do. So these green dots here are the places for humanitarian aid that are government run. Now, there's a lot of private aid efforts going on there for people who need resources and things like that. It's rather unfortunate, but I will mention it because I know everyone's thinking about it and they're going to comment on it anyway. As much as we might not want to believe it, culture, politics, all this stuff kind of does matter during a disaster. It shouldn't, but it does. And I have gotten a lot of really negative feedback for focusing on what's happening in Los Angeles because people just don't care about people who live in Los Angeles. That's not my job to kind of figure out, but I'm just trying to convey the resources here. So one of the things that I did want to highlight is the fact that a lot of these aid organizations that are set up in the city proper, they have very interesting politics, and you really have to be careful who you donate to in the Los Angeles area, because a lot of these groups are splinter cells of rather unsavory groups, or they're affiliated with groups that are encourage violence and things like that. So I did want to bring that up and mention it. It's unfortunate that I have to, but I did want to mention it along with a good alternative, which is Team Rubicon. I'm not affiliated with this organization, but I do have a couple of friends that are, and they have stood up a couple of efforts in Los Angeles throughout the sort of area to help kind of people get sort of situated. For those of you who have not heard of this organization, they're a veteran-led and primarily, veteran-staffed organization that kind of does a lot of disaster, relief stuff. You can see from the map they're all over the United States, but they've set up things in Los Angeles. So if you're looking or you're in the area and you're trying to lend a hand to help clean up and as best you can, with government ordinances getting in the way, this is probably one of the better organizations you can get involved with. Unfortunately, if we come back to a lot of the other groups that are kind of active in Los Angeles, I have seen, if you just were to Google, for instance, a lot of the roll-ups of here are the top 20 aid groups you can donate to for Los Angeles aid. The types of aid that are being requested are not what you might consider to be traditional disaster response aid. For instance, I don't necessarily think it's exactly a high priority to get as many musicians and singers as possible to, make music for the homeless throughout the area. People need food and water and shelter. They don't necessarily need some of these higher level cultural things. And Los Angeles being Los Angeles, unfortunately, there's a pretty strong, how should I say, skewing of priorities and missing of priorities. So, unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that happens, so I don't think people are going to be, looking for poetry and, things like that when their house is burned down. They need somebody to help clean up their house. So if you're looking to get involved and actually do some, traditional disaster response aid. This is probably one of the only groups that you can do so with in the area. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Let's go ahead and roll things up today with the GhostNet reports for this week, and there were quite a few. Unfortunately, I think my own personal antenna was having a bit of an issue or something like that, but I was able to get some very interesting propagation, I should say, probably due to the very strange solar weather we've been having. And I was able to pick up a station all the way out in Medford, Oregon, from here on the East Coast, which is strange for even for this time of year. I don't normally get that far, but came in crystal clear. Whoever was checking in from Medford, Oregon, I was able to pick you up here on the East Coast, which was kind of interesting. Also, some other longer form conversations that I unfortunately only caught like half of, or it didn't decode. That's kind of the thing with HF radio sometimes, is you kind of have to realize you're only getting half of the conversation sometimes, especially if you don't get the part of the transmission that has the person's call sign. So if they're transmitting something that's a longer message, and the call sign part is at the front, you don't really know who they're talking to a lot of times. So again, it's a work in progress. We'll keep working on it. It's been working out so far, but again, just one other tool in the toolbox. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Here are the sources as usual, and I forgot to mention, this reminded me, sorry, I was going to mention this at the beginning, but I totally forgot. The more astute of you would have noticed throughout the week that I have started integrating this platform called Obsidian into the Wire reports. So for those who, however you want to read my reports, if you read them on Patreon, that's awesome. If you want to read them on Twitter or Telegram, wherever you see the report being published, you will find at the very end of the report, right before the end, this link called Research. And this will take you to my Obsidian page, where I'm linking all of the sources for each of these reports. It's kind of an interesting thing, is something that I'm trying to do to kind of increase the things that I do for you guys, and I think that this would probably be very helpful, rather than you guys having to wait for the end of the week for my sources for each of these reports. The reason that I haven't been doing that is sourcing is very, very hard it's harder than you think to do on multiple platforms. So for instance, on Twitter, any kind of sourcing is really just hard to do, because Twitter really, really deprioritizes and will shadow ban posts, and they will deprioritize posts that have external links in them. So I think I can get away with just having one external link in every one of my Wire reports, and then you can get all of the other links here. So again, it's just something that's kind of unique to all the platforms that I post my work on. So one of the cool things about Obsidian, though, is you can get to different kinds of intelligence reports here. I've got a bunch of links if you want to check them out. And if you go back, say, to a Wire report, you can see this interactive graph. If you're on the desktop, you can actually see this graph and see which reports are linked to a bunch of other reports and the things that they're linked to and stuff like that. So pretty handy. I can also make use of tags here at the bottom, which is harder to do on multiple platforms. And once you click a tag, you can see all of the notes and pages that reference that particular tag, right? So I thought it'd be kind of a cool thing to do, something that I can do to improve the work that I do for you guys. And I thought that might be kind of helpful for those of you out there who want to kind of follow this sort of thing. So that's pretty much it. That's all I have for today. Thank you guys all for watching, and thank you for sticking with me through this one. And I guess we'll see what next week brings. So hopefully Monday will just be a quiet and peaceful inauguration, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. We can kind of move on to other things, but we'll see how it all turns out. So thank you guys all for watching, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.